right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is David Padilla. You can find me on the internet as David. That's my username on Twitter, on GitHub, and basically everything that matters. Hold on. I work for a company called Crowd Interactive, which is a Ruby on Rails consultancy based in Mexico. We also organize the only conference down there that treats topics like Ruby, JavaScript, and all that. You can go to that website if you want more info. And I'm here to talk to you, or more like to sort of guide you through how to write web applications with Ruby, but not with Rails, nor Sinatra, nor Padrino, nor any kind of frameworks. First, I want to give you a little bit of background of why I'm here, or where this talk came from. So I basically invented MVC on ASP Classic. I don't know if you guys are old enough to hear about ASP Classic. Those were the good days. So I invented MVC on ASP, although not really, not formally. But when I was working back then, my first job, it was ASP, and I was doing things like this. I remember they threw me into a project that had code like this. There was like a page, page1.asp, and we had all that code at the beginning where you set up your connection and everything relevant. And then on the body of the page, you had like the dynamic stuff, and you ran SQL queries and all that. And then whenever we needed to do another page like this, we will just copy all the code into page 2.asp and just change what's relevant, right? But everything was copied and pasted into page and page and page, which was kind of odd. So when I began working with this, I was wondering, like, how can this be possible? What happens? Like, it was painful to change something on the layout, for example, like just the page title, because you had to go page one by one to change whatever needed to be changed, and it made no sense to me. So I came up with some sort of hack. I changed the code to do something like this. I discovered there was some sort of include, so I said, I put all my database stuff in a single file, and then I decided to use the query string to drive through the application and do something like this. So I only had index.asp, and then through query string I said page product list, and then with a fancy case I will say, okay, if it says products, then you have to call products.asp. If it's another page, call this one, and so on. And this made things easier. If I needed to change something on the layout, you will just switch it on index.asp and not the whole application. Now, before you judge me for this code, let me remind you that it was the year 2000, right? That is Nickelback back there. I was listening to a lot of Nickelback back then, so you can think where I was, right? So it's 2000. I moved on from ASP. I went into the world of Java. I learned about Spring, about struts, and that was when someone introduced me to the concept of MVC, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what I needed back there, but it didn't exist. And if you think about it, it was sort of the same concept, right? Like separate your concerns, whatever it matters, and stop reusing code, basically. And after a couple of years of doing Java, I was introduced then to Rails. I was lucky enough to get a job doing Rails programming, and that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years, and I've been very happy about it. So if there's someone that has recently moved from Java to Rails, understand this feeling. So I've been happy for the last 7 years, until I hit what I guess I'd call my mid-programmer life crisis. What happened to me is that I was thinking, those days were cool, where you had all these problems that you needed to solve with programming and all that stuff. And right now I think that everything is just there. You just need to bundle install, and the world is solved. So I began thinking, programming web applications with Rails it's kind of boring. That's like I hit my mid-programmer life crisis, and it's because I began thinking, like, building website with Rails is not enough programming. There's a lot of magic, like Akira just said. There's a lot of magic going on. It's not enough programming for me. It feels like if you called yourself a great programmer because you do Rails, it's the same thing as calling yourself a carpenter because you bought your furniture at IKEA, right? Like, Yeah, I built that table. Oh, you have skills, right? You know what I mean? And on top of that, things like this happened, right? If you know Constantine Hasa, he was ranting the other day because Rails is like the worst React citizen there is. And he was telling us that it was because they never contribute features back, implemented encrypted sessions in Rails, while it should be on the layer of rack, things like that. And the problem is not that we, as Rails programmers, don't want to contribute back. It occurred to me that it's maybe because most of us don't know what's going on outside of Rails, right? Like if you were at that last talk, there's all these concepts that we probably don't know that they belong to Rail ties or to rack or whatever. We just think that everything is Rails, and it's not. And also, we used to have all these problems. We used to actually write SQL, and now we don't do any of that. So maybe our mind is not challenged enough. So we need to start thinking about everything that's outside there. We need to bring programming back, basically. And so that's why I'm here. I'm going to try to show you how to write web applications with Ruby, but not Rails, and maybe just a little bit of rack. I'm going to explain to you a little bit what rack is, and it's basically just a super cool interface that acts as an interface between web servers and applications. So basically what happens is that the web server, whether it is Unicorn, Puma, whatever, has a hash with request headers, right? And that hash is sent over to the web application that by convention needs to be any object that responds to the call method and receive that hash. And then the web application does its things, and the only thing that needs to do is return back an array with 3 elements. One should be the HTTP code of the response as an integer, a hash with all the headers of the response, and the body, which will be any object that can respond to the method each. And that array travels back to the web server, and then the web server just turns it into something that the browser can understand. So, like I said, and like you've heard, all you need to run a rack application is the file config.ru, and define on that file, using the run directive, the object that will respond to call, and that will receive that hash of headers. So what you're seeing right here is basically the smallest but most useless web application ever. But it's just those 3 lines, and that works. So this is the dangerous part. This is where I do some live coding. Call me a rebel if you like. So let's do some live coding. I'm going to get out this here. And let's begin with that. You can see that, right? Yeah, that's good. Let's begin with that config.ru thing that we mentioned there. We need the run directive. We'll create a proc, because a proc can respond to call. We'll ask it to print that hash, that we'll get from the server, and then just answer 200, a hash, and just some empty array, which is an object that responds to each, right? An array can do that. So let's see what happens. To start any rack application, all you need to do is run the rackup command wherever there is a config.ru file, and then it just boots up, basically. So it's telling me that it's booting up on port 9292. So if you go to a browser and we reload, there's nothing here because we're not doing anything, but you can see here that we get that hash, right? This is what the browser sent over to the rack application, and it got, all that information that the browser is sending. So that is great. Next thing, let's actually do something with this. So we're going to create a body like all web application have, and it will be body. I'm not very good at HTML, so please forgive me. Let's do hello world. It will be close the body tag, close the HTML one. And, let's just send that body back. See what happens. We restart our web server, and boom, we have a working web application that serves a single page, basically. All right, things are working. The problem right now with our web application is that it's only serving one page, no matter what the path is. So if you go like to slash, like the root path, it's hello world. If you go to slash admin, hello world, it doesn't matter where you go. It's always, the same thing, because we need something to actually grab the request path and send it over to wherever it needs to be, wherever it needs to go. So we're going to use, that's what's called a router, usually in the MVC pattern. And the router just does that. Basically, it just takes the request path and then send it over to whoever needs to handle the request specifically. This is very complicated logic in general. It's way beyond just doing a case structure, but we'll do that for now. If you want to learn more about the router in Rails, it's a gem called Journey. And as you can see, it has features and problems, which is basically just designed for Rails, and that it's too complex right now. And you can imagine why. Like if you define routes, there's all these cases that needs to be handled, whether if you have the method, and if you have variables and all that. So it's complex logic, right? So we're not getting into that. We're just going to use the same technology that I used 10 years ago, which is defining a case. Yay. So first thing we want to do is say something like path equals, we're going to get it from those headers and then say case path. And, when that path is the root path, just serve this. And if it's something else, just say, hey, not found. And return a 404, no headers, and return that body. And that's it. Yes, that's a router. Sweet. So we restart our application and see what happens. Oh, so now product not found. And if you go to root path, hello world. Great. So as you can see, the server is getting the same, it's sending the right codes, 404, 200, and so on. So we now have some sort of router, right? So what's next? If we probably don't want to have this code, just pasted in a single file and do our whole web applications here. So let's move this to a class to make it a little bit more understandable. So I'm going to steal this, and I'm going to put it into a app.rb file. Okay. Instead of this, I'm going to say like class app. It has to be. It has to respond to the call method and receive env or that hash. And I'm going to end the method. I'm going to end that. And I ident it, and that's it. Now, if we go to config.ru, I'm going to require that file. And then I'm going to tell rack, instead of doing stuff here, just send the hash to that class, right? Because now it's an object that can respond to each. Sorry, to call. So let's just make sure that this is working well. I don't want to write a test for this because you saw the keynote. So there you go. It's still working. We now abstracted our code to a class. So that's great. What's next? So I guess what's next is to go to our here and create controllers, right? Instead of having this laying around, we probably want a class that does this. So let's create a folder real quick. It's controllers. We'll put them there. And let's say root controller RB. What? Root controller. I know what's going on. Hold on. Yeah. Root controller RB. We say, okay, root controller. And you have, I don't know, the action show. this is where our code will be. We probably want to have this controller class receive that env through the initializer, and then say self env equals env. We add it as a, and there you go. And here, instead of doing this, we'll just say root controller new get env and show. We want to require that controller here. And let's make sure this works. It doesn't. Perks of live coding. I know what it is. Don't worry. We're okay. Okay, so we start our web application and it's still working, which is perfect. So what else? What else does a web application need? It needs views, right? We need views. We need to set this HTML logic. We need to set it apart and put it in a different component. And that's not like the controller HTML pasted into a controller. So let's create views. Hope you guys like Haml. I do. So we're going to use that to create our views. First of all, we need to create a folder views for this controller in a specific. All right. So let's create a view. Show HTML Haml. We need like a head, title, RailsConf. We'll create a body, and h1, something like that. Controllers, root controller. And then here, let's create a method that will be render. And that method, I want it to receive like the template path. And what you need to do to render like a template with Haml and stuff, you need to open the file first and read it into some sort of variable, which we'll call template, and then just say, dear Haml engine, can you please render this? See, it's easy. That's why I chose Haml. So we don't need this anymore because our super view is going to do it. We're going to say render views root show Haml. And I think that's it. We probably just need to require Haml if you don't want it to blow up. There you go. And let's see what happens. Yay, we're still there. So now we have views. The title changed because on that other version we didn't have, but now we do. And the whole point of what we're doing right now, it's because we didn't want it to sort of duplicate code and copy and paste it. So we probably need layouts, right? Like with Rails. So let's create a layout. First thing, we do views, layouts. Yeah, that'll work. And let's open what we have right now and just steal the first 4 lines. No, actually, we need everything all the way here. Yeah. And we indented. Let's open view layouts. Let's call it app HTML Haml. Views layouts app HTML Haml. And here's where we paste it. And like good old Rails, we're going to do a yield, and that's where we want the view code to show up. I'm on time. That's good. We go back to our root controller, and now we define a method that will be render with layout. Same thing. I need to know the template path. And let's see. First, we open our layout file. We're going to hard code it because that's how we do layouts. No magic here. do the same thing. Dear Haml engine, can you please render that layout? The trick here is that you can pass a block to render, and then whatever you render inside of that block, that's what gets rendered to yield. So we simply call render again with that template path that we were looking for up there. So now we change this call to render with layout. We restart our application, and it's still working. So now if I go and change the title, for example, to 2014, then it should change. Yay. So now we have a layout. That's great. So what else do we need from web applications? So we usually need to have dynamic information on our web application, something like this, like maybe the name comes from the database or comes from a query param or whatever. So we need to be able to change data on the views, right? So let's see if, first of all, we just add that variable there, like Rails, as if Rails will do it, but we can see that it's not that easy. It doesn't happen magically. So what we need to do for this to work is we go back to our controller, and well, first of all, we need to define it, right? Let's say world. And second of all, the render method can receive as parameter the context of where the layout is going to be sort of processed. So basically, we just need to tell it the context should be the same object. And that way, this instance variable will be part of the package. So what we do here is we are going to add the context to our render method. But as default, we'll just say, hey, just grab self if there's nothing there. Same here. And we need to pass that context to this render method. Over here and over here. So it's all the same. And this is going to happen sort of magically because of that default where we set it to self. And yay, it's working. So now we can populate that variable or couple of variables with whatever we want, basically. The most typical thing that we could do will be to send it over in like params. We can do something like this. If it comes as a parameter, do something, or else just do world, right? But params is a method that we need to basically define. So let's define that. Def params. I'm not going to write code to like go to a query string. We're just going to use a method that already exists in RackUtils, which basically does that, parse nested query. What's going to do is going to take the query string, and it's going to turn it into a nice hash that we can access. So we're going to access here in params name, and it should work at the first attempt. Let's try it. So default is hello world. It would say name, I don't know, RailsConf, and it works. Hello Jane, whatever it is, it just works. And well, I guess the last thing that we could do with our web application will be to properly abstract it. And we probably want to grab all this code and set it on a controller class, right? Because over there, okay. Let's go back to our root controller and then say, hey, just inherit from controller, and that's it. That way we can, in the end, we can add more and more controllers to our super web application. Only thing we need to do is require controller over here, and let's make sure that it still works. It still does. That's good. That's always good. Yep. There you go. So that's it on the coding side. As you can see, you have a perfectly working web application right there from using no frameworks at all, only your Ruby code. Now, I probably don't have the time to add models and all that because that's different logic, but you could just inherit active record base. They've already done it, and it's hard logic that's already do. All you need to do is just define classes and say inherit from active record base, and you will get like all the magic that you get on Rails. If you're a little bit more hardcore, then you can use SQL and just write your methods like so. You can access to the database as if it was a hash, and just write your .old, your .find, and all of that logic. Or if you're even more hardcore, you can directly use the PG gem or the MySQL gem and just do this sort of crazy stuff where you actually write SQL, yay SQL, and then just iterate through the results and put them into a hash and all that. This is fun, like this is programming, right? And one last piece of advice I have for you is don't ever actually do this. Don't ever actually do this unless you're some sort of speed freak or performance freak. When I ran my tests, my super web application was able to handle 700 requests per second, and every request will take 1 millisecond, which is pretty fast, right? But when I created the same application using Rails, I had like 2x slowness, right? Like it will take 2 milliseconds to run, which is unacceptable. I want 1 millisecond. But this is unfair because Rails solves all these problems, right? We have logging, caching, database pooling, sessions, cookies, security, all of that we're not considering on our application. But even if you don't want to do this in real life, you do want to read code. And you do want to go and try and see how Rails is doing things. You want to try to understand how is it doing it, right? Like you want to find that code that connects to the database, that code that turns that find into select star from that table, all that. You want to go and read and try to understand how things work. And then once you understand, try to write your own framework. Well, why not? There's space for a new framework. Maybe you'll be the next DHH, and we'll be able to afford a race car and all that. But the most important thing is that you will understand, like master these topics. You will know, you will have that feeling of saying, hey, I know how this works. This is great. Now I can go back to doing my IKEA software, but at least I know how it works, right? And then if you see the RailsConf team, give them a hug, because you will understand also like the pain that they had to go to get Rails to where it is right now, because it's not easy, right? We just wrote like 30 minutes of code, but it does basically nothing. It needs to take care of routing, like I said, caching, security, and all that. And that's a lot of lines of code that need to happen. So you see a RailsConf guy, you say, hey, thanks for that. Give him a hug. And my last disclaimer is I do not actually think that writing web applications with Rails is boring. That was just added for drama. And I hope you understand that. That said, I will tweet, or whenever you see the slides, you will see like the code example on my talk on that URL. And thank you.